They did not plan to wake up with you filling their mind from the very first second of the morning. That is the first truth you need to hold on to. Most people are not strong enough to face what they pushed down for a long time. They use discipline, pride, routine, and silence to hide what they do not want to admit. But hidden feelings do not stay still forever. They build quietly, they gather weight, and little by little, what looked calm on the surface turns into a private battle underneath. This was never as simple as distance. It was never just mixed signals. It was deeper than that. Something inside them had already started changing, even when they acted normal, even when they looked controlled, even when they tried to seem untouched. You probably felt it before they did. A small shift, a strange tension, a silent pull in their energy. Something was growing under that cold appearance, and no matter how well they hid it, it was real. If you have ever noticed someone acting calm while their inner world is clearly not calm at all, then you already understand this. People do not welcome strong emotion the moment it appears. They resist it. They question it. They try to rename it into something smaller. They call it timing, stress, chemistry, confusion, anything except what it really is, because the truth threatens the version of themselves they worked hard to protect. And the more a feeling shakes their pride, the harder they try to bury it. But buried feelings do not disappear. They turn into pressure. They wait. Then one day, usually in a quiet moment, they rise again stronger than before. That is why this morning felt different for them. Not because something new began, but because something old finally broke open. Stay with this, because it only gets more real from here. When a feeling means nothing, people do not waste energy fighting it. They let it pass and move on. But when a feeling carries weight, the mind starts building defenses. That is exactly what happened here. They tried to use logic like a shield. They told themselves it was temporary. They said it would fade. They convinced themselves it was only a passing thought, only a strange mood, only a moment that would lose power if ignored long enough. But if something truly means nothing, it does not demand this much resistance. You do not battle what is not there. You do not work this hard to erase something empty. Every effort they made to remove you from their mind only made your presence sharper. Every distraction worked for a while, then failed when they needed it most. They wanted to stay in control. That was the real issue. Not just control over the situation, but control over themselves, over their reactions, over their emotions, over the part of them that started responding to you in ways they never expected. You disturbed a balance they trusted. You became the one thing they could not fully explain, predict, or manage. And that loss of control unsettled them more than they wanted to admit. It was not only about you. It was about what your presence awakened inside them. Something long asleep began to move. Something they had kept buried under routine, caution, and self-protection started asking to be felt again. That is why they pulled back. That is why they became hard to read. Their inconsistency was not proof they felt less. It was proof they felt more than they knew how to handle. Avoidance is not always the absence of desire. Sometimes it is the clearest sign that desire has grown strong enough to start a war inside a person. And once that war begins, silence becomes heavy, distance becomes loud. Their conscious mind kept ordering them to stay safe, to act normal, to keep moving as if nothing important was happening. But another part of them would not cooperate. In quiet moments, when the noise of the world dropped, your image kept returning, not softly, not casually, clearly, more clearly each time. They noticed that you were not fading the way they expected. If anything, you were becoming more real in their thoughts. That is the part denial cannot survive. Denial needs blur. It needs distraction. It needs time and space, and enough noise to drown out the truth. But your effect on them did the opposite. It became stronger in stillness, stronger in absence, stronger when they had nothing else to hold on to. And then this morning came, not with a dramatic scene, not with a message, not with some big event from the outside. It came with a silent collapse. Their walls did not fall because someone attacked them. They fell because the truth inside had become too heavy to carry behind those walls any longer. That kind of moment changes a person. It is quiet, but it is powerful. Once the mind fully accepts something important, it cannot easily go back to pretending. That is where they are now. Not halfway, not vaguely aware. They know. And knowing creates its own kind of chaos. Because now they have to face what this feeling means, what it asks of them, what it changes, what it could cost. This is where many people freeze. Acceptance does not always bring peace first. Sometimes it brings pressure. Sometimes it brings fear. Because naming the feeling makes it harder to escape. Once something has a name, it becomes solid. Once it is solid, it starts shaping every thought around it. So if their energy has felt strange lately, if the silence has felt loaded, if the distance has not felt clean or final, there is a reason. And if you know that feeling, keep listening, because this next part explains the deeper shift. They thought admitting the truth to themselves would calm everything down. They believed that once they stopped denying it, the storm would shrink. But the opposite happened. The feeling became sharper, more defined, harder to dismiss. Awareness did not weaken it. Awareness gave it structure. Now every thought has more weight. Every memory feels more alive. Every quiet moment seems full of tension. And when the mind loses the ability to deny what is real, it naturally divides. One part wants to move closer. The other part wants to run. One part wants relief. The other wants safety. That is not light confusion. That is a real split between desire and defense. It is what happens when emotion starts becoming attachment. And attachment feels dangerous to anyone who is used to controlling every inner response. The more deeply they feel pulled, the more their defenses rise to meet that pull. That is why they did not suddenly become brave and clear after realizing the truth. Instead, they paused. They overthought. They studied every small detail. Simple things started feeling serious. Easy moments started feeling risky. Because now this connection carries real meaning, and real meaning always brings vulnerability close behind it. You do not fear what has no value. You fear what matters enough to change you. That contradiction is exhausting them. The same force that draws them toward you is also pressing every alarm inside them. It follows them into ordinary moments. A sound, a pause, a memory, a random silence in the middle of the day, and suddenly you are there again in their mind, not because they chose it, but because the deeper part of them keeps holding on. Once you cross that line in someone's inner world, you stop being optional. You stop being easy to replace. And that is exactly why this has become so difficult for them to keep pretending is small. Watch closely, because this is the point where pressure starts turning into change. They keep asking themselves the same question in different ways. Why you? Why this strong? Why now? Why does your presence affect them in a way that other people never did? They search for practical answers because practical answers feel safer. They want a reason they can file away, label, and reduce. But this connection does not fit into something neat. It does not feel built on convenience. It does not seem created by simple timing or surface attraction alone. It reaches somewhere deeper, into recognition, into that strange feeling of seeing someone and realizing they matter before you can explain why. And if that feeling is real, then it demands something from them. It asks for honesty. It asks for openness. It asks for risk. Those are the very things they have spent years avoiding. So instead of stepping forward, they try to slow everything down. They create space. They delay. They tell themselves distance will cool it. But distance has not cooled anything. It has made the truth louder. When distractions fall away, what remains becomes easier to hear. And what remains for them is you. They feel it in the way their thoughts return without warning. They feel it in the sudden rise of emotion during ordinary hours. They feel it in the strange unrest that will not settle no matter how tightly they try to control it. Suppression keeps failing. That is why tension is growing. They know what they feel, but they still resist it. They sense the truth, but they still question it. They feel the pull, but they still avoid the weight of acting on it. That creates pressure that does not leave. It stays under the skin, it builds, and the longer it builds, the more unstable everything else becomes. This is not only about emotion anymore. It is also about what that emotion exposes inside them, their need to connect, their fear of being seen, their hunger to feel understood, their discomfort with being affected this deeply, and that is why they keep moving in circles. One step closer in feeling, one step back in behavior. But circles cannot go on forever. What they feel for you is forcing them to face parts of themselves they would rather keep hidden. That is the real source of the pressure. It is not just attraction, it is exposure. To care this much means they are no longer protected by the distance they used to depend on. To be affected this deeply means their carefully built self-control is no longer absolute. That makes them uneasy, so they move back and forth. One moment they imagine what could happen if they stopped resisting. The next moment they convince themselves it is too complicated, too risky, too disruptive to their life. This inner swing is not random. It is a defense pattern. It lets them taste the truth without fully surrendering to it. But that balance is failing now. You cannot keep something this meaningful at half distance forever. Delay has a cost, and they are starting to pay it. Suppressed feelings do not vanish into empty air. They become restlessness, mental noise, inner friction. Lately that friction has grown stronger. It affects their attention, their mood, even the way they react to small things around them. They feel off, but the problem is not on the surface. It is deeper. Something unresolved is rising and demanding space in their life. They are getting closer to a point where the old methods no longer work. They can still look calm from the outside, yes. They can still act controlled, yes. But underneath, the structure is changing. The more someone denies something real, the more forcefully it returns later. What once felt manageable now feels intrusive. What once felt distant now feels present. What could once be ignored now sits in front of them with a weight they cannot easily move. And when the deeper mind stops staying quiet, it does not ask politely. It breaks through in sudden reactions, sharp mood shifts, and moments of frustration that seem too intense for the situation. If this sounds familiar, then you already know what it means. The feeling is no longer waiting for permission. It is entering their daily life whether they want it to or not. You are not just a person in their outer world anymore. You have moved into their private inner space, and that changes everything. External things can be avoided, calls can be ignored, messages can be delayed, distance can be created. But inner realities do not stay outside the door. They follow a person into silence, into sleep, into the moments when there is nothing left to distract them. That is why their resistance is weakening now. The main question is no longer whether they feel something. They know they do. That part is settled. The new question is what they are going to do about it. And that question frightens them more than the feeling itself. Because action means exposure. Action means the risk of being seen clearly. Action means giving up some control. Most people spend years trying to avoid exactly that kind of emotional risk. But once someone has been changed from the inside, control no longer works the same way, and you have changed them. Not lightly, not briefly, deeply. Their view of connection has shifted. Their understanding of emotion has shifted. Even your absence has changed shape in their world. It is no longer quiet. It is loud, more noticeable than before, more powerful than your actual presence used to be. And that is what keeps breaking their defenses down. Not just missing you, feeling your influence everywhere, seeing that nothing else carries the same intensity, nothing else feels as alive. That comparison is dangerous for someone trying to move on, because it slowly exposes the truth that this cannot be replaced so easily. And once they begin seeing that, panic starts growing in a quiet way. Not obvious, not dramatic, just steady. If something feels rare, the fear of losing it becomes real. Sometimes that fear is even stronger than the fear of never having it at all. So their behavior changes. They become hard to predict. pulled by impulse, held back by caution. That is the war you are feeling. One side of them wants relief. It wants to stop fighting. It wants to move closer, tell the truth, and end this constant pressure that has been building inside for too long. But another side, more trained, more guarded, tells them to stay back, stay careful, and protect themselves at all costs. That battle is draining them. It is no longer just about feelings. It is becoming a question of identity. The version of themselves that keeps avoiding you cannot live forever beside the version that feels you so strongly. Sooner or later, one of those versions has to give way, and they are starting to notice that. They are beginning to see their own patterns more clearly. They catch themselves reaching for distractions every time the truth gets too close. They hear their own excuses and recognize them for what they are. That kind of self-awareness is uncomfortable because it destroys the illusion of total control. Once someone sees their own avoidance clearly, they cannot fully return to ignorance. Even the distance they keep starts feeling false. Even the silence starts to feel like a betrayal of what they know inside. They are running out of places to hide this. They cannot go back to emotional numbness. Something basic has changed. And when that kind of change reaches a certain point, the mind begins demanding resolution. It cannot carry this level of contradiction forever. They are getting close to that edge now, closer than they admit, maybe even to themselves. One more wave of pressure, one more failed attempt to suppress it, one more quiet moment where your presence fills their thoughts. That could be enough, because this process does not usually end in a slow fade. It ends when the truth becomes heavier than the effort of hiding it. If you are still here, keep going, because this is the part where everything starts turning irreversible. They are not breaking down because they are weak. They are breaking down because the truth has closed in from every side. Logic is no longer giving them an exit. Distance is not solving it. New distractions are not working. Time did not erase what they felt. It sharpened it. Every excuse that once sounded solid now feels thin. Every delay now feels forced. Every attempt to push this away feels more and more like turning against their own deeper self. People can carry pain for a long time. They can even carry fear. But what becomes unbearable is the slow damage caused by fighting what they know is true. That is where they are now. Avoiding you has started costing more than facing the reality of what they feel. That is why their resistance is weaker. Not because they chose peace. Because they ran out of convincing reasons to keep hiding behind the same walls. They hoped time would shrink this. It did not. It made the feeling clearer, heavier, and harder to escape. Inaction now feels more painful than risk. Silence now feels unnatural. Distance now feels wrong. Their inner world has moved past uncertainty. What they feel is no longer vague. It is real, solid, lasting. And once a suppressed truth reaches that level, it does not stay buried. It comes back with force. It asks for alignment. It asks for outer action to match inner reality. Until that happens, pressure keeps building. That is the stage they are entering. A silent but powerful stage where the old mask stops fitting, and every day that passes without honesty makes the discomfort stronger. You may not hear it from them yet. You may not see a full confession yet. But inside, something major has already shifted. And once that shift becomes complete, going back becomes almost impossible. This is why their energy feels unstable. This is why their behavior has changed. This is why the silence feels full instead of empty. Clarity has not brought them peace. It has brought urgency, restlessness, a pull that keeps pushing them forward, even while fear keeps pulling them back. That is why they may seem hot and cold. One day they feel close. The next day they withdraw. One moment they seem ready to move toward you. The next moment they vanish into thought, caution, and self-protection. It is not because the feeling is weak. It is because the feeling is strong enough to threaten the old structure they lived inside for years. Their fears and desires are colliding now in the same place. That collision creates heat. It creates tension. It creates the kind of inner pressure that cannot stay hidden forever. They have stopped making their emotions feel small inside their own mind. That is a major change. Before they minimized, they dismissed, they reduced. Now they know better. Now every memory carries meaning. Every pause feels charged. Every moment of silence seems to ask the same question. How much longer can this be ignored? Not long. That is the honest answer. Because when a person reaches the point where silence feels heavier than truth, movement becomes inevitable. Maybe not loud, maybe not all at once, but something starts moving. Something shifts in the way they think, in the choices they consider, in the excuses they stop believing. This is what happens when feelings pass the point of private suspicion and enter full inner recognition. The emotional truth becomes impossible to unsee. And once it becomes impossible to unsee, the pressure for action starts becoming stronger every day. That is what is happening now. Not fantasy, not empty drama, a real inner turning point. So if you felt all along that there was more beneath their distance than they showed on the surface, trust that instinct. Because what is happening inside them is no longer light, and it is no longer fading. It is gathering force, and that force will eventually need an answer. They can still delay for a little while. They can still hesitate. They can still try to act as if nothing has to change yet. But the room for delay is shrinking. The mind can tolerate contradiction only for so long before it demands a decision. When inner truth and outer behavior stay too far apart, the tension becomes too intense to carry. That is why even their usual defenses are starting to feel tired. The old stories do not protect them the way they used to. The old habits do not numb things the way they used to. Even the distance they once trusted now works against them by making them feel your absence more sharply. The deeper mind is no longer waiting in silence. It is pushing upward. It wants resolution. It wants honesty. It wants the outer life to match the inner truth. That is why this stage feels so intense. They are being moved from inside, not by pressure from other people, not by outside expectations, by what they can no longer deny in themselves. And when a person gets to that point, change becomes less about choice, and more about surrendering to what is already clear. That is where they are heading. Every part of this has been building for a long time. This morning was not the beginning. It was the moment the truth stopped hiding behind excuses. It was the moment the walls inside started giving way. It was the moment the feeling finally stood there without disguise. And now they have to live with that clarity. They have to decide whether they will keep betraying what they know, or move toward it and face whatever comes with it. That is the real pressure now. Not whether they feel something, whether they can keep refusing what they feel without breaking themselves in the process. And the answer is becoming clearer by the day. They cannot do it forever. No, what they feel for you is no longer weak, uncertain, or easy to set aside. It has become part of how they move through the day, part of how they think, part of what they notice when the world goes quiet. That is why the final stage of suppression is never endless silence. It is confrontation. A moment where the inner truth becomes too strong to leave untouched. That moment is getting closer. Their excuses sound empty now. Their delays feel artificial now. Their resistance is not strong because it is healthy. It is strong because it is the last defense before surrender. And last defenses often look the hardest right before they fail. So if their actions have seemed inconsistent, if their distance has felt strangely emotional instead of truly detached, if their silence has felt loaded instead of empty, there is a reason. The truth inside them has become too real to ignore and too strong to hide forever. Time did not weaken it. Time fed it. Distance did not erase it. Distance sharpened it. Control did not solve it. Control only delayed the moment they would have to face themselves fully. That moment is here now, or close enough to feel. They may still struggle. They may still pause. They may still move in uneven steps. But one thing has changed for good. They know. And once a person truly knows, everything after that begins to move toward resolution, maybe slowly, maybe painfully, but forward. Because in the end, people can survive fear. They can survive risk. What they cannot survive forever is the slow damage of denying what has already become a living truth inside them. And that truth, no matter how quietly it began, has finally found its full weight.